This is the Culture Study Podcast, and I'm Anne Helen Peterson.
And I'm Arabelle Sicardi. I write, it's such a long name, I need to workshop, but it's You've Got Lipstick on Your Chin on Substack. And it's all about beauty and power and just beauty gossip, I guess.
So one thing that you've written a lot, or I've seen you reference a lot, is that beauty is terror.
Yeah.
So can you explain this a little bit?
Of course. So I have been chanting this probably since I was in college, so easily 15 years. It's its own teenager by now. And I've always been really obsessed with the connection between beauty and capital and crisis and the things that we do to ourselves and to each other for just like a little bit more power, a little bit more ease, a little bit more comfort in a world that punishes ease and punishes rest. And I've always kept an archive of the different ways that beauty is used to punish or demean people, or to subjugate and create a more carceral world, like a crueler landscape. So beauty is terror is basically shorthand for the fact that we punish each other and ourselves all the time for this ideal that we're never, ever, 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 ever going to reach or achieve. But sometimes we let our fears control us, right?
Yeah.
It's just the way that we are as humans and how we're raised. And that fear also breeds innovation within us. Like, I mean, from the very beginning, it's like, oh, we're afraid of the dark, we bring fire. Like, you know, like it's literally built into our DNA to find different ways to navigate the things that terrify us. And the way that we pursue beauty, I think, has so much to do with that basic fear of not belonging, of not being seen, of not being loved, of not being cared for. It's kind of our way to navigate the worst impulses in ourselves.
That reminds me, too, of like the first time that I was introduced to the Lacanian concept. I'm referencing like Lacan, Jacques Lacan, the psychoanalytic thinker. I knew 15 years ago, but I have lost much of my understanding. But what stuck with me then was this concept of lack. There is always this lack that keeps us driving forward as individuals, right? It's very difficult to rid oneself of the pursuit of closing that gap, right? And this can be with accumulation, it can be with sex, it can be with beauty. But like there's no point where you ever psychologically reach this like fulfillment, right? Like there is no moment of contentment or happiness. It's just that there has to be something else that you can perfect. And when we're talking about beauty, we're talking about on our bodies. And, you know, when you were talking about like the pursuit of beauty as terrorizing even, I think about how sometimes people describe, let's say like the participants in like a Real Housewives franchise and like the abject feminine that's going on there, right? Like the monstrous feminine. And so much of it is their very almost pure pursuit of beauty ideals and how they leverage that pursuit against one another, right? Like small things can become weapons between them in terms of lacks that each of them have.
Yeah. I mean, Real Housewives, that's its own episode right there. It's an incredible psychological event. The terror of the pursuit of beauty to me helps me understand myself in terms of like what I'm afraid of and who I think is going to punish me. That's probably why I'm so obsessed. It's like, what is this inclination? Where did it come from? It helps me psychoanalyze, actually. Yeah. Understanding my impulses, understanding trends, and like, do I actually like this cover or did I just see it 5,000 times on TikTok and so on and so forth? It's cool that you brought up Lacan and stuff because I'm also very interested in queer theorists as it relates to identity and the body politic. 100% would not be the person or the writer I am without understanding the queer theory of psychoanalysis and all that stuff as well. Like, if we're going to understand beauty as this, so let's say beauty as an ethical ideal that we'll never reach and we're always striving for, that can make us feel never enough. It can make it feel like we're in a state of perpetual loss, perpetual longing, perpetual grief, right? And I think a lot of people are in that state and sometimes they're not in it. And those moments are glory and relief. But for me, queer and my queer identity and queer theory as it relates to all of this stuff has given me such relief and grace, let's say, because okay, so Jose Esteban Munoz, some people will understand that academic and that theory, but he basically wrote that like the pursuit of always changing and being able to iterate upon yourself is a kind of queer utopia. And obviously there's going to be haters being like, you're paraphrasing horribly. You're right. I haven't read that in like a decade. Let me live.
Both of us.
100%.
Both of us.
But I really absorbed it 100% because it helped me reframe this idea of never being enough and perpetual longing into a state of perpetual exploration, of perpetual curiosity, and finding joy in the ability to seek and to find recognition and be able to adjust both what I consider the destination and my own bearings to be more accommodating to my own needs, right?
Yeah.
And when you're able to reframe the loss into curiosity, it completely reshapes your psyche and your brain into a space where the idea of like there being a lack is kind of silly because you can just reinterpret every new discovery or change as part of the inevitable process of existing and finding joy in that. And that has helped me so much. Of course, I'm never going to be perfect. There's things about myself that perhaps I would change, but being able to know that I can live long enough to discover what that change might be and tweak and find joy in just understanding it as an experiment that I have control over, it makes it so much more fun and bearable.
I know. Yes.
So,
well, and just like destabilizing anything that resembles a norm.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is actually a great way to connect to something that I've been thinking about in terms of a newsletter that you wrote earlier this year about how beauty is going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what I took from your argument in that newsletter is that we are, instead of like destabilizing norms, we are reinscribing them.
Yeah, it's looking grim out there. We're not okay.
So you have 4 categories, and we'll obviously direct people to this specific newsletter and the amazing charts that
Thank you for liking my charts.
But so you talk about fashion's lack of diversity, the pharmaceutical success of Ozempic, conservative affirmative action values regaining control on bodies and funding, and the rise in media attention on trad wife domesticity.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot
and
there.
How do you, I know. So, and again, we'll direct people to it, but how do you see the very visible rise, and also like we have statistics on how many more people are engaging in these procedures? Like, how does plastic surgery fit into that understanding?
Understanding of trad wife domesticity and conservatism?
I mean, just like the
whole
the reinscribing of norms.
Okay. So I think that this is a hydra of bullshit.
Yes.
Let's describe it that way. It's a hydra of bullshit. So there's definitely this huge backwind of conservatism in younger generation as well. It's not just like boomers being loud and obnoxious about conservatism and Christian America and all of that stuff. It's in young people too, disguised as cringe culture, right?
Yeah.
Younger people are so afraid of being earnest and exploring and kind of failing in public that they'd rather not be seen as cringe. They would rather try less and do these things. And it's not just me being like perhaps a aging millennial saying this. I've had these conversations with Gen Z people as well that are very afraid to experiment and stuff. But plastic surgery, I think, is so linked to specific kinds of religions as well. And Mormonism is like becoming more and more prominent, like on reality television as well. And what I'm understanding is that Salt Lake City is like this very specific ecosystem of vanity and God that I find fascinating because they have more plastic surgeons than Los Angeles, where I'm currently based, which I didn't know about until prepping for this episode. Fascinating. But also it's like when I was reading different studies about plastic surgery and religion based in Salt Lake City, the percentage of women there specifically that have gotten plastic surgery as opposed to anywhere else in the United States is it's so much stronger. And it's so much tied to how they conceive of their religion. It's 82% of the women studied in this 1,500 person study had some sort of plastic surgery. And some of them had prayed beforehand to see, like, to feel it out if God would approve of them getting something done. And the average statistic in the rest of America is 4%.
All right, we're going to get more into this when we come back. Today's episode is sponsored by Blue Land. So I live on a rural island and it is spring. And I also live with 2 dogs who are filthy. They're just like, every time they come in the house, somehow there is dirt everywhere. It doesn't matter if I rinse them off in the shower. Well, then the dirt gets in the shower. It doesn't matter if I like put a towel on them. Like, there's just dirt in our house a lot. So I spend a lot of time trying to get that dirt off of places. And I don't want to use a substance that when my dog comes along and licks that surface, that it's going to hurt them in some way. That's why I've switched to Blue Land. These products are made to meet the highest environmental standards. Blue Land products are 100% plastic-free and made with certified clean ingredients that are safe to use around your family, your pets. You can put them on the leaves of your plants. You don't have to choose between the safe option and what actually gets your house clean. Blue Land is on a mission to make it easy for everyone to make sustainable choices. We believe that hardworking, clean products can be the norm, not the exception, so you can do better for your family and the planet at the same time. That includes cleaning sprays, hand soaps, toilet bowl cleaners, and laundry tablets. All of the Blue Land products are made with certified clean ingredients that are safer for you, your family, your pets, and the environment. I live really close to the water, and I think about all the time, like, what am I using in my house that is somehow like leaching into the soil and then into the ocean? We have really hard water and it creates all of these deposits. That's part of the reason that I'm always looking for, like, how do I find something that actually works on like gross stuff on my toilet? There's these toilet tablets and they actually work to remove like all sorts of like mineral deposits, limescale, the stuff that's left behind by hard water. It's amazing. That's what Blue Land actually does. It's somehow magically it is effective and also not destroying the planet around us. It's currently trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. Blue Land has a special offer for listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/culture. You won't want to miss this. blueland.com/culture for 15% off. That's blueland.com/culture to get 15% off. I love that you like actually anticipated the first question that we have. So this comes from Christina and it's about Utah specifically. And I think we can use this to like extrapolate into some of these larger conversations. So, okay, let's hear from Christina.
I moved to Utah in 2023, and friends and I were shocked to learn that, at least according to some data, Salt Lake City has the second most plastic surgeons per capita of all U.S. cities, sandwiched in between Miami and LA, which make a bit more sense. How does the pressure or desire for plastic surgery tie into religion, specifically Mormonism, perfectionism, wealth, and the trad wife trend?
I also think there's something to do with whiteness here that we have to delve into, right?
Yeah.
But like, if we can connect the dots between like a conservative yearning for a particular type of face, right? Like an ageless face. And also like heterosexuality. If we're thinking about, I mean, it's complicated because Salt Lake City itself is actually not like a locus of Mormonism. It's much more in the suburbs. There are a lot of queer people in Salt Lake City itself. So I want to be careful that we're like distinguishing and not like equating all of the state of Utah as Mormon. But if these norms are much more accepted, particularly within the church, and I think if anyone wants to see how this shows up, I would suggest watching a couple episodes of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which is about a bunch of moderate to non-practicing or ex-Mormons who were very popular on TikTok and social media, and the reality show that's tracking them. And they, some of them like understand the doctrine of treating your body like a temple to mean like, I will be pissed at you if you drink even a sip of alcohol, but then very much want to modify their bodies accordingly. And like there's also like all of these different understandings of how you should practice, not just chastity, but also modesty. But how does plastic surgery fit into our understandings of modesty? How does even like a blowout with curls, like the long hair with like beachy waves, like how does that fit into this manufacturing of femininity, which I think they understand is very much sanctioned by the church and by God?
Yeah. I think ultimately it's all a matter of interpretation, and that interpretation is defined by your own rigor in studying your own religious texts, and how much of it is influenced by the people around you and the social capital and aura that you're playing with. Because if you are not actually reading, if you're not doing like your liturgical homework, so to speak, and you're just going by vibes and like, oh, the pastor's wife, so and so, or like, I need to do this to keep up with my version of church group, those are totally different motives and engines that are driving you.
Right.
And ultimately, there's like this one billboard I'm actually obsessed with when I was doing my research for this, and I think it really does summarize the impulses that are playing there specifically. And it was like, it said, God's remodeling his temple. Isn't it time to remodel yours? I'm like, cursed image. And I just think that that was like such a perfect summary of the pressures that a lot of people might actually be dealing with. Right. And it's like, if you are considering your body to be a public space that is being judged by God, then of course you're going to have some sort of pressures regarding maintenance and upkeep. And they're commenting on how the pews aren't in great shape. And that becomes a competition for approval and aesthetic nature, right? As opposed to doing something to honor yourself for your own care and your comfort, and if that has anything to do in the equation. So in my opinion, like, if you are being driven by the political machinations of the religious space that you're in, and who's the most popular person in the crowd, and who might get more done in like a sociological experiment type of vibe, then you're gonna have more pressures to conform to ideals that get their approval. That's very different than having a personal, private relationship to your God.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like the question asker points out, like, oh, it would make more sense that there would be such a high per capita in Miami or in LA. But if we understand this as in terms of like maintaining norms, once this becomes a norm within a community, then it becomes the thing that like is aspirational. Like as soon as it, like, there's like a tipping point, right? Like more and more people have it and you feel like you should get it. And I see this a lot in conversations amongst people my age that are like, oh, young people are getting Botox? Is this something I should be doing? Right? Like this sort of like
not wanting to feel left out.
Yes. Or like, is everyone doing this thing and I didn't know that I should be doing it kind of thing. But again, it's to maintain a certain type of face. I do think that part of this too, we can like, some of it's conservative rich lady face. I think Nicole Kidman's face is often held up as the paragon of this, but it's also like Fox News anchor face. Do you ever think about how, if you know, then you know that someone's had work done, but it shouldn't be obvious? Like it's this real simultaneous erasure and announcement.
Yeah. The invisible labor and like the craftsmanship behind the labor is totally its own competition, right? I absolutely have been in group chats with various people, like either in the beauty industry or actresses or whatever, where everyone commiserates with like who got what done, or should I go here? What's this person's signature? Because plastic surgeons, they are sculptors of the face, right? Some do have signatures. You're not going to get the same kind of nose job at every single clinic. Some people are better at noses for people of color. Some people have their own, like, very thin. When you become to get hyper obsessed and you understand these things, you understand and you can clock the signatures and perhaps like the bad signs of a bad job. And that becomes its own currency. That knowledge can be weaponized. It's very easy to do so because you feel like you're protecting yourself by knowing these things, but also it's a way to disdain other people who might have gotten it done. It's like, oh, you were not able to find a way to make this seem invisible. Right. We gotcha.
Right. And especially someone who like maybe got into a technology before the technology had stabilized. I think about this with Madonna specifically. Mm-hmm. She got her work done too early before they knew how to do it without getting like the pillow face.
Yeah. The cost of innovation.
Yes, exactly. She is the wreckage of innovation there. But held up as almost the disdain that can be directed your way if you do it wrong.
Yeah. I mean, there are surgeons that are, their entire YouTube presence is just like hour-long video breakdowns of how much money and how much time celebrities have spent on their faces. I've watched them in anthropological like fascination to just, because they'll go back to the deep archives. Like they'll go to the childhood photos and compare and dissect. Is this just, a woman growing up? Or did she start getting work done here? And then they zoom in. It's like Interpol or something. You're just like, oh, now I've seen their nostrils. Like, what's going on here?
Well, it's so weird because I look at pictures of myself from when I was 20 and like my face looks different.
Yeah.
Because I'm 20 years younger, like it's not that I got work done. It's that like faces change as we grow.
And I think our hyper obsession with plastic surgery and kind of preventing or slowing down aging as much as possible has made us hyper survey ourselves and each other to a point of like, the government would be jealous of a very jealous, insecure woman when it comes to like how much we can hyperanalyze ourselves. They would be like, "Oh, I can take notes from you." You know what I mean? It's so real and so specific. I think about the loss of what we don't know about like each other and our bodies like kind of all the time. I would so wonder about what, Kylie Jenner or whoever would look like had they not gotten stuff done. But I only think about it in my head because when I see the plastic surgeon videos that like actually speculated or use, I don't know, AI to like deep fake what people would look like without plastic surgery, I feel such sadness that our bodies are taken out of control of ourselves and, put through this simulacrum of like these technologies just for someone else's conversation. And then I understand that I am part of the problem.
You're like mourning the ghost self of Kylie Jenner, but then you're like, but that's weird that I'm like imagining this other body evolution for a celebrity.
Exactly. Like I'm not her mother. Like that's not my responsibility. We ultimately are allowed to do whatever we want with our body to the detriment of only ourselves and perhaps the influence it has on other people. But how much of that is our individual responsibility and how much of that is beyond us? I think the answer changes all the time depending on your visibility, right? And I mean, I think going back to like the Salt Lake City stuff and like Mormonism and plastic surgery and conservatism, so I do think that there is a link between like the whiteness and the wealth and the pressures between those identifying factors and the plastic surgery. It's all to adhere to a very specific version of white femininity.
Yep.
Right? Specifically white femininity, not femininity. Kind of when we say femininity, we kind of also ultimately also assume the white in front of that phrase.
And we're talking about like facial structures.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, and like we can't disconnect any of this from actual threats to white supremacy, right? Like, oh, is it a coincidence that we're trying to double down on these norms of white femininity when white femininity is actually under threat? Right?
Perceived threat. Yes. Right? It's never been stronger, but it's also in such crisis that it's a power grab in every possible way in every single scenario of public life and private life. they're creating the threat and they're offering the solution, and it's a red pill that lots of people have taken.
So this is a good segue to our next question, which is about costs and how those get alighted. This comes from Lauren.
As plastic surgery and aesthetic treatments have become more normalized, there seems to have been increased marketing of early intervention plastic surgery, for example, minimally invasive facelifts for 30-year-olds. I notice the cost associated isn't as readily or specifically discussed by those who are undergoing not only plastic surgery procedures, but aesthetic procedures as a whole. How are people paying for these procedures as the cost of living increases? How does it fit with the bigger issue of individual debt and how future generations will afford to retire?
So I love that Lauren tacked on this larger piece at the end that isn't just like, oh, this stuff is expensive. It's more like, okay, but let's also talk about like personal debt loads and like the prospect of ever retiring, and the notion that part of the reason that we are protecting our faces is because we are going to be expected to like function in the marketplace of workers for longer because we can't retire, right? Like we have to be like capital actors for so much longer.
All of these questions are so good. Like, I want to have dinner with every single person that asks these questions and just talk about this for like 8 hours. Incredible dinner conversation. 5 stars. Yes. My answer, long and short, is debt float, baby. Debt float. Buy now, pay later, and Klarna are the bullies of our society, and targeting, obviously, the younger generations or getting them sooner. I know more than, like, say, 3 young people that got into like debt basically illegally through using Klarna before they turned 18, right? They're going to become adults with a debt burden already because of just impulse purchasing and the ease of which that it happens when you're buying anything online. So people aren't, becoming more wealthy or attaining things without cost. They're just taking on the cost faster with more ease. It's awful.
Yeah. No, and I think about the first time I had just graduated from college. At this point, I was using like maybe Clinique moisturizer as my skincare routine. And my best friend's mom treated her to a trip to the esthetician. There was no insurance. It was like, oh, this is my way of setting you up, is giving you one visit to the esthetician.
Like a drug dealer giving you a free baggie.
But it also, like, I was like, I can't afford any of those things. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no way. I can barely afford to, like, buy moisturizer or buy makeup. It just was not within my entire conception of self. And then my other story is when I was in grad school and trying to fight various, like, late 20s acne. My dermatologist, I thought I was just going to a normal, like the dermatologist who gives you drugs that are covered by your insurance. And this dermatologist was also, because this was in Austin, I didn't realize it was a fancy lady dermatologist. And she's like, and what will help is this skin peel. And I was like, oh, my doctor is telling me to get this thing where they they peel all this stuff out of your face. And so I did it, and I didn't realize that it wasn't covered at all by insurance. And it didn't really help that much. Mm-hmm. But I could see how it was so visible to me how you get on that slippery slope of treatments, right? Like one thing begets another. Mm-hmm. And it's like lifestyle creep. Those things become not wants, but needs.
Yeah. I mean, I was doomed to this curiosity and this journey from like the very beginning of my brain forming. I'm so serious. I remember my first science fair project that I can remember being like a cross-examination between different shampoos and like if they actually help split ends or not. And I did get an award for that research, by the way.
What, first or second place? What did you
I think I got like second place or something.
Yeah.
So it was like acceptable in terms of Asian success that I had spent my time doing this. I remember like the grudging, like, okay, fine, from my parents. But yeah, I've always been obsessed with like, what can I use to stop things? And so this isn't a new impulse for a lot of people, but I do think that it's now unfortunately really easy to get caught up in the cost of it and the ease of attaining things now because the industry of aesthetic adjustments, let's say, has been Uberfied. You can schedule all of these things on your phone without speaking to another human being. Whereas even maybe 10 years ago, you actually had to go in for consultations and do all of these things. You don't really need to do that now. And because of the ease of access in that way, and also the material cost has actually gotten cheaper as things have improved, it's made it sickeningly easy to do things. And I mean, yes, in the States, everything's still very expensive and awful, for sure, 100%. But it's awful in different ways in other countries where it's cheaper. I will say that. Like in the UK, you can basically learn to give injections within a week. If you buy a Groupon to learn basically how to get certification to give injections. And then by the end of the week, after taking, I don't know, a workshop series, you can have Botox parties at your house. You'd be awful, and it's a danger to yourself and others to do so. But it's very easy. There's so many unlicensed and unregulated non-medical injectors in the UK. It is its own crisis. And we kind of knew that already when we watched like British reality TV, and then everyone's like, oh, everyone looks so old, or this, that, and the other thing. It's because the access to less skilled injectors and medical interventions is the barrier so much lower, which is a danger, actually.
Yeah.
And, you know, in China and in Brazil, all of these injections and surgeries and stuff, so much cheaper. It's like a fifth of the price. I know this because I've done like medical tourism myself in Hong Kong when I was there visiting family. I didn't fly there to do it specifically, but you know that I Googled and researched all of that stuff. And I spent every other day going to different med spas. And the majority of the people there were medical tourists coming to Hong Kong specifically to get peels and stuff. And it's so much cheaper. It's less than a dinner here. So yeah. people will go out of their way for an opportunity.
Well, and then like, okay, so I'm going to buy a ticket to Hong Kong, right? Or I'm going to buy a ticket to Turkey.
Yeah.
No, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there are costs associated with that. And I know how my brain works. Like my brain's like, oh, well, the procedures are so much cheaper there that like I'm actually saving money.
Girl
but
math.
You're also,
yeah.
Like, but I also want to like go back to this question of this just being part of so many other components of lifestyle creep.
Yeah.
Which like for capitalism to continue to grow, we have to continue to want to buy more things, right?
Yeah.
And so when you reach your like excess point of accumulation, the next thing to do is like, instead of modifying your home, like it's to continue modifying the self, right? Or if you can only afford to rent a crappy apartment in New York, like you can still modify the self.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said, it's a hydra of garbage. It's and I mean, my perspective is obviously going to be a little bit more warped than perhaps the average listener or something, because I grew up in the fashion and beauty industry. I was a teen fashion blogger before Instagram existed. So I have seen and been part of like the push for influencer culture and how it's been part of how we've reshaped our desire. And it's just as powerful as like, you know, official businessy collaborations. You're way more likely to buy something if someone you have a parasocial relationship has said it's cool. Because you have a parasocial relationship with them, and you might actually think that they're your friend or you're looking out for you in some way. And the reality is, when it comes especially to plastic surgery stuff and all of these injections, is that you don't even actually have to have a lot of followers. You can be what's considered like a niche, micro niche influencer, 10,000 or more followers. That's not that hard to achieve. As soon as you reach a certain level of relevance anywhere in whatever market, you have access to discounted or free services of all sorts, of lifestyle, home. People have gotten free like rent. They've gotten free travel, certainly free services for like Botox or surgeries, definitely in Miami and other places. And so would such and such influencer paid money to get non-invasive facelift or princess injections or a peel at a surgeon or a med spa? Maybe, but they're absolutely going to talk about it if it's free.
Yep.
And then you get all of like, then they've given their access and their, you know, gold seal to their entire network. And then, you know, it's better It's better marketing than most of these places have ever been able to prepare for. So that has absolutely shaped the system, and it's unfortunate. And I know I'm part of the problem in that regard. I just told you about my Hong Kong trip, but at least I'm self-aware of it. And also I think that understanding financial literacy is what saves my soul, number one, but also is something that more people actually need to understand. If you can't afford something, don't make yourself pay it back later.
Yeah, perhaps. No, I mean, I think this is part and parcel of all of that stuff, and the way that like something like the pay later components kind of invisibilize the debt the same way that old school, like they still do this, but like when I was young and vulnerable to these sorts of appeals, it was the specific store credit card. So like the American Eagle credit card, right? Like that sort of thing. Yeah. Because it's like, oh, here's a credit card to spend specifically at American Eagle. Yeah. So we didn't use this question, but someone wrote in and their mother-in-law had told them that everyone would get a facelift if they could afford it. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's true?
No, but I understand where she's coming from. Like her understanding of what everyone means is so limited and specific. Yeah. And I understand it even if I don't relate to it. It's quite sad to feel like you live in a society in which everyone is fundamentally unhappy with themselves in that way. That seems really, really depressing to me. And I'm glad that she had like the knee-jerk reaction to understand that that's not the world that she lives in, or that I know I live in. You know, some people genuinely love what they wake up to, and I wish that I had more of that strength every day.
I do think there's like a turn. It's almost like a fork in the woods where like you reach a certain age and either you're like just lean into your crone-ness in all of its emancipatory meanings. And I think for a lot of women that also sometimes means leaning into your queerness too. Or you're like, oh God, my societal worth is under interrogation. Like I am in a full-blown panic. What can I do? And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of acting out of absolute fear. Yeah. Or acting out of curiosity.
Yeah. You're in a hostage crisis with death your entire life, right? And you can either choose to sit at the table and be a nice dinner companion to this idea that your death is out of your hands and you're going to die in age no matter what, right? Yeah. Or you might, actually try to negotiate and do this, that, and the other thing to try to get stay young or whatever for just that much longer. For me, I'm like, one, I think it really helps that I'm Buddhist. And I'm like, the void's the void, babe. The void's the void. It's going to happen. I don't know. But also, as a queer person, and especially like a non-binary queer person, I understand that my ability to age and live past my life expectancy is a gift not often given to people in my circumstances. And the fact that I get to see gray hairs happen is something I never thought I would live to see, because I really did think that I was going to off myself by 25. I don't know why I chose 25 like as an arbitrary number. Don't ask me. I'm not going to look through my journals to find that. But I really did. I thought I understood that like my life had a very specific expiration date because of my queerness and this, that, and the other thing. And once that passed and I realized that that was all like a self-invention, or I was letting the fear and the lack of care and understanding from society kind of determine my own mortality and expectancy as like a person seen as a woman most of the time. Once I let that go, or like I realized that that wasn't the only story I had to adhere to, my life opened up in such wild ways. And I now live a life that I didn't even dream of having, of being able to have. Like, the things that I love about my life are things that I didn't think that I would ever get to even consider deserve,
Yeah,
and
it's a gift.
It's a gift, and there's not enough queer elders, and they were systematically neglected into death. Like, the AIDS crisis removed entire generations of people that deserve to be here. So the fact that I get to age as a queer person and have multi-generational relationships with people that have dealt with far worse than I have is such a blessing, you know? So
yes.
I wish that people, like younger people than me that think that like you automatically turn old when you're like 28 or something, I wish that they understood there's so much life. There's so much life and comfort and beauty and discovery and resilience and sexiness and all of these things that continuously happen after a certain age if you don't get bogged down by that narrative that you're only hot or worthy until you're like 24 and then God help you. Like, come on. That's like the inner white man speaking in your head. You gotta let that dude go. He's not fun.
Today's episode is sponsored by ZocDoc. All right, when was the last time you needed to go to the doctor, but you pushed it off? Personally, I have made the excuse that I am too busy. I don't want to pick up my telephone and call anyone on the phone. I'll just wait and see what happens, see if I feel like shit again the next day and the next day and the next day. Or I'm just like, I do not know which doctor to go to. And like, oh gosh, should I go to urgent care? Like, could I even get an appointment at my doctor? I think we've all been there. Booking a doctor's appointment can feel so daunting. But thanks to ZocDoc, there is no reason to delay. They make it so easy to find and book a doctor who's right for you. ZocDoc is a free app and a website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 100,000 doctors across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, primary care to urgent care, and more. You can also filter for doctors who take your insurance, are located within a certain distance from you, or are a good fit for any medical need that you might have. They're also highly rated by verified patients. Once you find the right doctor, you can see their actual appointment openings, choose a time slot that works for you, and click to instantly book that visit. Appointments made through ZocDoc also happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments if that works for you. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/culture to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/culture. ZocDoc.com/culture. We're going to do a hard pivot into this question that I know we're so excited to talk about.
Okay.
This comes from Sarah, and it introduced me to something I didn't know existed, but I know you knew existed. Okay, from Sarah.
I've never had any work done in real life, but a few years ago, I became obsessed with plastic surgery ASMR roleplay videos on YouTube, particularly lip filler and Botox consultation roleplays. I don't think it's a coincidence that I found these videos relaxing and entertaining during a time when I had lost my healthcare through work and was navigating the slow, frustrating process of getting back on Medi-Cal. I know these YouTubers aren't real practitioners, but the fantasy they offer of highly personalized, experience-oriented care where the patient is allowed full self-determination and all the time in the world to ask questions soothes some deep feelings of neglect in me. Is my interest in a virtual plastic surgery experience just a weird personal thing? Maybe a trans thing? Or am I just experiencing something more broadly related to the allure of plastic surgery culture? Does plastic surgery culture, in some complicated, privatized way, offer a desirable contrast to the general American healthcare system, where patients are able to receive thorough, preference-oriented, gender-affirming, and resourced attention from providers? Or is the quality of plastic surgery care in real life just as messy as normal medical care?
Okay, so Melody followed up with Sarah to get examples of these videos. And I know Melody sent these to you, and you were like, oh yeah, I've got these. So what, like, your interest goes back a while, or you're like, awareness, I would say. We should also say that these videos are long.
Yeah.
They're
like documentaries in and of themselves.
Yes. They're like 42 minutes, an hour. They involve like a lot of, like, it's usually the speaker, at least in the 4 that I saw, the speaker is a woman who is looking directly at the camera, pretty close proximity. And there's definitely an asthma component in terms of both the timbre of the voice and doing various noises.
Tapping and scritching. Yeah, the whole 9 yards.
Yes. So let's play a little bit from one of these videos so listeners can get a feel for what we're talking about. This one is called Your First Botox Treatment. And I have to just warn you that when I brought this up to play it, to watch it, Charlie was sitting across the room and he was like, what is going on? So get ready.
Hi there. Welcome. Go ahead and have a seat. Get yourself comfortable. So you are my last appointment of the day and my first Botox appointment.
What's going on with them? Why are they popular other than just falling asleep to a particular type of voice? Like, what's activated here?
I mean, I think that was such a deliciously rich question that answered itself, quite honestly. I do think it has to do with like the cultural neglect of healthcare and care in society. And that's coming from a person that's like also non-binary, is like had the gender dysphoria component and like absolutely has sought those videos out myself, like very early in my like gender crises, to be like, oh yeah, you actually are the only affirming provider I've ever seen in my life. Thank you. Yeah. Complete stranger on the internet, not certified. Thank you. I love that we're in space and I can pretend that I'm in the Fifth Element and I'm Lilu. Absolutely. You get me. Knowing that, I also understand, and I personally conceptualize plastic surgery as gender affirming care, no matter if it's given to a cis person or not. And I think that that is a conversation that cis people are terrified of having, because it makes them conceptualize gender as perhaps a performance that they didn't understand as such beforehand. But you can't tell me that Elon Musk does not have gender dysphoria and is terrified of gender performance. That man is absolutely terrified, okay? His entire life is dedicated to terrorizing other people in regards to gender and how it should be presented. Like, his, like, gender selective family planning stuff, come on. As soon as we found that out, I'm like, oh, that scans. That scans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
It's like, oh, you don't like your trans child. I wonder what's going on here with your own plastic surgery.
Yeah.
And performance of masculine power. Like, it's all connected.
Yeah. They understand gender is terrifying and gender is a prison. They just want to be the prison wardens, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that people really love these ASMR videos, specifically the ones that are very dedicated to like care in some way, either manicuring or head massages or foot massages, or they're like going to put you into cryo sleep before you reach Mars or whatever. They're understanding your desire for being cared for as an individual person. Without judgment towards what that care means or looks like. And that is not something that I would say most people are regarded in at least American healthcare. You know, you're paperwork. You are a bureaucracy, and you're not a person. You're a problem to solve.
I keep thinking about this experience I recently had in the emergency room, and I'm totally fine. But I was taken to the emergency room, and when I was watching the videos this morning, I was actually really reminded of my experience in the emergency room, which was at a very high level of care because they thought I was in crisis, right? So basically I had some chest pains and they thought that it was like potential cardiac something, but it was just muscular. I'm totally fine again. But the level of attention and like priority that you receive when you are, and I want to like very clearly underline this because this was emphasized when I was in the emergency room. When you need like a high level of care that is very legible as like crisis, but also when you have insurance and you're a 40-something white lady, right, who is also cisgendered and not, as you pointed out, like not problematizing anything for them. I was next to, in the emergency room, they just have like curtains, that divide you from the other people. So you are up, you can hear everything that's happening. And like the person next to me didn't speak English as their first language and was really struggling to articulate what they needed through their daughter on the phone. The person on the other side was, as he proclaimed, 95 years old and was struggling with memory and didn't know what was happening to him and didn't have an advocate. And there were other people in like the hallway who were unhoused and weren't receiving the same level of care. And like the experience that I had was what people aspire to and want all of their medical experiences to be like. And so I understand why you would seek, essentially, like these are like exposure therapy almost. Like what if you could find someone who is gender affirming, who is affirming of like also people I think who are who have diseases that aren't totally legible, right? And women who like people don't believe their pain or their suffering. Like what if you had someone who really listened to you?
It changes your life. It shatters you in the moment. It's so painful. I mean, for me, when I'm chronically ill too, my family has lots of disability within it. And so I've been within medical spaces advocating for myself or other people my entire life. I am, unfortunately, an expert in having to be a difficult person in a medical environment. And what is so frustrating is that you expect the worst all of the time. And when you're treated like as human, that actually, it's excruciating how much you're not prepared for it sometimes. Like I went to get like my IUD taken out at like a Planned Parenthood. Shout out, we love you, Planned Parenthood. After having really, really not affirming experiences at like the gynecologist that was in my medical network that I had like driven to and fought to see. And like I ended up crying and raging out of that appointment and being like, I'm just going to go back to Planned Parenthood. That's the only option. And when I had gone, I started crying, I think like as soon as like the provider opened the door. Cause like I knew I would be a little bit more likely to be seen as like a human being worth talking to there. And they had asked me my pronouns and all these things during intake and just were more careful of me. Right.
Yes.
And they held my hand when I was crying and they didn't say anything because it seemed so normal. And like that, the tragedy of that experience being normal for them, like I can't imagine the burden that a provider that actually cares about you must feel every time someone breaks down in front of them because they know like this might be the first positive experience they've ever had in a medical environment. That must be so heavy. That it's like, it's a lot of loss everywhere. It's a lot of grief. And so I understand us turning to like literal fantasy scenarios to try and find recognition, because where else would we find it?
And to underline it even like in a bolder pen, I think that it also explains this desire to turn to privatized service, like to concierge providers just generally, right? Like if you have this sort of experience with an esthetician or like, I don't know, my physical therapist who's not in network, I'm like, oh, what if I could have that experience with my doctor as well? But that pushes us towards a model that is, it's like private school, right? Like, it drops the bottom out.
But it's a perfectly curated disaster right now. You know what I mean? Because we turn to woo-woo and alternative treatments and perhaps holistic therapies because we're not getting these treatments, we're not getting the care and stuff in traditional medical environments. Some of those are absolutely legitimate services. I think Western medicine is not the only authentic version of care or science or treatment ever available. But at the same time, that's how the lack of true accommodation and understanding and empathy found in the US healthcare system is also why like people are putting beef tallow on their face and like drinking like unpasteurized like, milk and stuff. It's all part of the same conversation about who's taken seriously for their fears and concerns and who's dismissed and when and why.
For our last question, we're going to get a little deeper into questions of gender affirming care. This one comes from EK.
I used to be anti-plastic surgery. When I got top surgery, it really challenged my notion of elective plastic surgery as an unequivocally bad thing. Here I was benefiting from its advancement and relative accessibility, plus the surgery itself changed my life. On the topic of modern elective plastic surgery, I often find myself tongue-tied and unable to articulate a clear stance. When I look at Madonna or Nicole Kidman, my knee-jerk reaction is, that is bad. But when I frame all elective plastic surgery as gender-affirming care, why do I feel guilt shaming these women now? How do we get all of these people commenting on plastic surgery trends to start talking about gender performance, gender constructs, and plastic surgery as gender-affirming care?
Right. Well, what's your first reaction to this, Arabelle?
If we could have them all get into that conversation, I would love that. But I also don't. Just because they begin having that conversation doesn't mean that their takeaways are going to be yours. They might actually radicalize themselves further into transphobia. I'm going to be totally real with you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I don't.
Right, because it's like the norm should be that we should only use plastic surgery as a way of accentuating very like traditional understandings of cisgendered femininity or masculinity.
I don't even know if there needs to be like barometers of like, this is good, this is bad, in terms of ethics and obligation to culture. I think that, yes, I think the healthiest way for at least me to frame my relationship to plastic surgery is that whoever's doing it, it's gender affirming in some way, even if their version of gender performance is unhealthy or toxic in my perception.
Right.
That's the most accurate version of my relationship to it that I can provide. I think when we consider gender as a test that we're getting graded on, that is very dangerous and troubling. And I also think that that's how most people conceive of it. Like it's a test you're getting graded on. You'll be punished excessively if you fail. And so when we have them open up this conversation about gender performance, that becomes a conversation about self-surveillance, community surveillance, and who is performing correctly or not. That may actually make them more punishing. It might make them have a conversation about, safety in bathrooms and all of these things. It's not an easy, it's not going to be an easy conversation to have with someone that is already so fundamentally different from you in terms of your gender experience.
Yeah, I like the part of EK's question where they say, basically, I find it really difficult to articulate my stance, right? Because I think that's true, right? Yeah. And maybe when you see Nicole Kidman or Madonna or whatever, like this is a moment for self-reflection. And I always think that like that's the value of celebrities, right? Is they allow us to talk about things and to figure out how we feel about things. And so your reaction to that is also a way to think like this is complicated. Here's a conversation I could have with someone else about like here are all these different contradictory ways to think about something like this.
Yeah, I don't think that it has to be black and white. I don't think that it has to be so rigid. Your relationship to the question or what you might conceive of as the problem. Ultimately, we don't know any of these women. You know, who are we to make judgment calls on them? And also, like, what would be considered good if their work was invisible? Are we only going to congratulate them when we can't see what's going on, or we think that they've achieved something, or like they've had their body tweaked in a way that we find palatable? Who are we to make that judgment call? Like, that is a matter of taste, and that does prove and underline the fact that beauty is subjective, and what they would get things revised if they didn't like it. They can afford that, right?
Yeah. I also like, I think that expanding the umbrella though to think of plastic surgery as more, not just as gender affirming care, but also including a lot of different procedures that we don't necessarily understand. Like Melody this morning was like putting together the numbers on the increases in plastic surgery and realized that she's like, I forget that I'm a statistic in this. Do you want to talk about that, Melody?
Yeah, so I had a breast reduction in 2021, and so I go back and forth in my head of like, well, that doesn't count, but like, yes, it does count, but also why do I care if it counts or not?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I did modify my body to make it more comfortable to live in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I think the conversation when we have it about modification, the umbrella term that I use isn't like plastic surgery, it's just body hacking. We all hack our bodies. We are all hacking our bodies all the time. You could consider like wearing a seatbelt, body hacking in an environment, you know, that's certainly saving your life, and it's attaching you to like these death vehicles, right? You're now part of it. Congratulations. You know, so when I conceive of these conversations, my umbrella term is that, because ultimately some people start using Botox or like getting shots because it helps with migraines or like TMJ and stuff like that. So, and plenty of people, they initially got on Ozempic because of things not related to the weight loss, but diabetes and all of these things. And it's because these things don't have very present borders, and they leak out into these other factors of how we live our lives and the ease that they provide our lives in these other ways. That's what makes them so alluring and kind of so, you know, quote unquote dangerous and seductive, because it's not just like an aesthetic difference, it's a material quality of life change.
I also just think about how people used to be so panicky about people having pierced ears. Talk about body hacking and like just an incredible amount of stigma and shame and like that somehow you are modifying your body permanently, and how that conversation has changed about ear piercing even over the course of, I would say, 50 years.
Yeah. Now there's bougie ear piercing places. We're going to
That's where I got my ears re-pierced when I was like 35 years old.
Yeah.
But just to show how these discourses, they are not stable.
No.
Like the way we are talking about different body modifications right now is going to be very different than how we're talking about them in 50 years.
Sorry, my dog agrees with you ardently, apparently. But yeah.
Arabelle, this has been exactly the conversation that I wanted to have. Not the conversation that people would maybe expect from an episode on plastic surgery. So
fun.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Love to provide the unexpected.
Where can people find you on the internet if they want to hear more from you?
You can subscribe to my Substack, which is just arabellesicardi.substack.com, or you can find me at like my general website, arabellesicardi.xyz. Or if you want to join my perfume event series, you can look up that. It's Perfume Pages. But I also have a book coming out this fall called The House of Beauty. And I don't think the cover's revealed yet, but technically the pre-order is live. So you can pre-order that. I do have a chapter related to this conversation. So
amazing.
People will enjoy that.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. Today, paid subscribers got a bonus segment with all of my advice on training for and running in marathons and all of Melody's dubious facial expressions. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We have so many great episodes in the works, and I promise you don't want to miss any of them. If you want to suggest a topic, ask a question about the culture that surrounds you, or submit a question for our subscriber-only advice time segment, go to our Google form at tinyurl.com/culturestudypod or check the show notes for a link. And if you want to support the show and get bonus content, head to culturestudypod.substack.com. It's just $5 a month or $50 a year, and you'll get ad-free episodes, an exclusive advice time segment, and weekly discussion threads for each episode. You also get a huge discount if you're already a Culture Study newsletter subscriber. You just have to go to the episode post, and you can find the link. And if you can't find it, just send me an email. The Culture Study Podcast is produced by me, Anne Helen Peterson, and Melody Rowell. Our music is by Poddington Bear. You can find me on Instagram at Anne Helen Peterson, Melody at Melodious47, and the show at Culture Study Pod.